Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Off the Rak, conversations on transformative leadership with yours truly, Walt Rakowich. If you're new to the show, I'm really happy to have you on today as well. And on a monthly basis, I host conversations with some of the most thoughtful voices guiding leaders to be more human and, frankly, more influential in the workplace. And so today, I'm joined by Neeli Bendapudi, the president of Penn State University. And I met Neeli 2 years ago through our mutual love of higher education. And so I want to introduce you to her. And prior to being named president of Penn State, Neeli served as president of the University of Louisville. Before that, she served as dean of the business school and then ultimately provost and executive vice president at the University of Kansas. And before that, she served at Ohio State University as founding director of the Initiative for Managing Services, among many other high-profile positions that she had there. And it's important to note that Neeli earned her PhD in marketing at the University of Kansas. And I say that because I've come to learn that everything Neeli does, she thinks marketing about. And I'm going to ask her a couple questions later on relative to universities and, the changing position of universities and how do you market that in the future. And most importantly, she's got a tremendous heart for people and a great attitude, an amazing zest for life. She's doing great things at Penn State. And I just want to thank you, Neeli, for being on and tell you what a pleasure it is to have you here today.
Oh, Walt, I mean this so sincerely. It is such an honor for me to have this time with you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be the president of Penn State. For people listening and watching, Walt was one of the people that gave me the opportunity on the selection committee for me to have this role. It is a joy, and I look up to you, truly. And so the opportunity to talk about leadership with you is unique and something I'm very grateful for.
Well, thanks, Neeli. So I have to, kick something off with just a little bit of an icebreaker with you because it's something that we both have in common. But people ask me this all the time. And so I'm going to ask you for the audience, what is a Nittany Lion?
You are right. We both do get asked this quite a bit, don't we? So the mountain ranges here, we're in Happy Valley. It's called Mount Nittany. And the range itself is about 300 million years old. But we know that the white settlers in this area called it Mount Nittany. We know that it predates Penn State University. And it's named for the Nittany Lion, of course, the mountain lions that apparently roamed around here till the 1880s. But the fascinating thing is folklore. We know that at least over 100 years ago, one of the people who captured the folklore here claims that Nittany was the name of a Native American princess, and that's where the Nittany came from. Now, you know how it is. Sometimes some folklore is maybe too good to be fact-checked. We can't find historical evidence of it. But the Nittany Lion is a tribute to the mountain lions that were in Pennsylvania. That's the literal answer. But to me, there's a symbolism. Walt, you and I are both relatively new grandparents, so I'll tell you, I have my almost 2.5-year-old grandson on video telling his mom that he saw the Nittany Lion. And he goes on to say, well, I call him the Nittany Lion, as though he came up with it. And she asks him why, and he says, I call him the Nittany Lion because he's a good Penn Stater. So for all of you, the symbolic, metaphoric meaning of a Nittany Lion is someone who really embodies the values of Penn State. And that could be the largest living alumni anywhere around. And of course, incredible alumni like Walt Rakowich right here today. So that's the Nittany Lion.
That is the best explanation I have ever heard on that topic. And so all I have to say back to you is, we are.
State, you got it. You got it.
So, Neeli, I'm almost breaking a cry. I got to tell you, at this point in time, you've worked at very large, diverse organizations. Obviously, I just went through a bunch of them: Ohio State, KU, University of Louisville, now Penn State. So this topic is about leadership mainly today, although we will peer into university affairs and the like. But can you share with our audience, I mean, you've had so many, positions, what leadership practices have translated for you to be the most useful across your career?
I'm happy to do that. And while certainly I'll draw upon my academic experience, but I also have an interesting vantage point of someone who's worked with CEOs and boards and business leaders for really as long as I've been an academic. Pretty much, I don't think a single semester went by when I wasn't working with business, and including as executive vice president of what was then a top 25 US bank. Now it's a top 15. So looking across both my academic experience and working closely with unbelievable leaders, whether it's Procter Gamble or AIG or the US Army, I'll try to distill it down. And I'm a student of leadership. It fascinates me. Student of the head and the heart and the hand, right? All the three things that you need to be a good leader, to be ready to do what needs to be done. And this is a distillation of lessons from many places. And if I can, I'll try to tie it back to specifics. I think that great leaders that I have studied have come from a sense of purpose. And including from your book, you talk about it a great deal. So the three words I am using now to describe my leadership journey at Penn State, I'll talk about those three. Purpose. So number one, I think it comes back to a sense of purpose. Why do you do what you do? And I think it's the job of the leader to remind people again and again and again of why we do what we do. It's not that we don't know the purpose, but it's easy to forget in the busyness of the day and the business of the day. I think that core sense of purpose really informs how we approach work. One of the great leadership stories, legends that I love is imagining that maybe it's even in your book, I've read it in many. Imagine that this is thousands of years ago and you're walking past three stone cutters and you stop the first one and say, "What are you doing?" And the person says, "Can't you see? I'm cutting stone." The second one, you say, "What are you doing?" The second one says, "Oh, I'm building a wall." And you stop by the third one and say, "What are you doing?" And that person says, "Well, I am building a chapel, a cathedral that will be the beacon of hope to people around the world for ages to come." All three are doing the exact same thing, but having that bigger sense of purpose, why you are doing what you're doing. I think we can all agree that that third individual probably has more resilience, has more joy in what they're doing, and has more fulfillment and gratitude for what they're doing. So I like to keep a clear sense of purpose. That I've learned from great leaders throughout. So at Penn State, one of the things I've learned is to go back to our roots. What's our purpose? Why were we created? We're a land-grant university, as you know, and it's kind of interesting in and of itself. In 1862, in the middle of the Civil War, what is President Lincoln doing? That's another great leader we could learn from. Well, he's not letting the problems of today stop him from the promise of tomorrow. In the Civil War, he's creating these land-grant universities. Now, we all know the land wasn't always granted. It was often grabbed from native tribes and taken. But I hope you'll bear with me. The purpose of a land-grant university was that education should not be just for the elite. It has to be to uplift the lives of everyday people. So that's a core purpose for us in higher education. A second purpose is all the research we do has to have impact. You know, a land-grant university has that moral obligation that the good that comes out of it. So for me, the purpose is, are we strengthening Pennsylvania, the country, and the world? Ripple effects. And the third one is the economic development of our region. So I'm trying to really talk about that sense of purpose. I will give a shout out to one leader, my dean, when I was at Ohio State University, Dean Joseph Aluto, who told me early on my academic leadership journey, he said, when you're a leader, you have to remember it's no longer about you. It's about the people you serve. So something I love about purpose is if you're not prepared to serve, you do not deserve to lead. So that sense of purpose, that it's about something so much bigger than you or me. It's what are we doing to stay true to the purpose. A second thing I learned more from business than from academia is agility. The idea that you could have the best laid plans and you could have the greatest strategic planning exercise, but something changes, you in business do not have the luxury of saying, let's study this for 3 years and year 4 we'll start to implement and year 10 we'll see the results. You've got to be agile. So a second leadership principle that I have truly learned is agility. Agility is not brashness. It is not taking, foolish risks, but agility is the recognition that we don't always have the luxury of 100% of the information, that we've got to make the best decisions we can to serve our purpose. The third thing I've learned, again, from a number of different leadership settings is if you can have deep roots, the strong sense of purpose, but you're willing to also be agile, that's how you can create opportunity and leverage opportunity. So again, these are 3 things I've learned. We can talk about teams and mentoring and what do you do, but the bigger picture purpose bigger picture words that I use for leadership are these 3. I hope it makes sense.
It makes sense. And when I think of you, sometimes, and I've gotten to know you really well over the last year or so, but I also think that you have an amazing curiosity and you have a great ability to listen. And when you are a listener and you have that curiosity, I think you are able to be more agile. And I mean, I've definitely seen that in you, and it's an amazing thing to watch.
I'm deeply, deeply grateful. I think the biggest lesson of all is what you have taught me too. I watch how you interact, and everybody, this is true. He's no longer on my board, so I'm just speaking the truth, not my boss anymore. But I've watched how you treat people on a team. I completely believe now that it's not about one individual. There's no Superman, Superwoman. It really is about the teams that you build and the teams that you cultivate. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson of all. All 3 of these, finding your purpose, being agile, leveraging opportunities, creating opportunities, really can only be done when we work together as a team. When we say we are,
that we mean we.
We do.
So Neeli, a lot of people I think would say that they don't know this, but Penn State has almost 100,000 students, I think, and because most people think about the main campus as being the campus where there's 40 or 50,000 something, but there's also 20 branch campuses or 19. You could get I don't know the exact number, but it's 24 branch campuses where there's another. Campuses, yeah. Yeah, so when you add it all up, there's 100,000 students. So you are one of the largest universities in the country. And no, go ahead. You'll correct me on the exact amount.
No, I was just going to say you're absolutely correct. Penn State University is definitely one of the most complex universities in American higher education system. It's rather unique because 96% of Pennsylvanians are within 30 miles of one of our locations. That's what appealed to me when you all reached out to me, is you can actually impact an entire state. There are systems elsewhere, but you are correct. It is an incredible university with the breadth across, and of course, globally as well.
So how do you lead? So I guess the question is, if I was, listening to this, what are some of the leadership challenges associated with leading that complex an organization? And, how do you get your arms around that?
Well, I'm in month 2 of year 2. So I guess I've got it all figured out, right, Walt? Not quite. It is, this year we'll be somewhere around a $9 billion enterprise. very complex. The breadth, over $1 billion of research that's produced annually. So yes, it is a very complex system. The beauty of higher education, so there are many challenges of leading a large complex organization like this, but the beauty is shared governance. This is the idea that students will fondly think of their university and say, oh, I was there 4 years or 6 years or 8 years. But think of the faculty and staff who've been here decades. So both the strength and the challenge of universities is that we have a system of shared governance, whereby faculty, staff, students all participate along with the president and the board to say, what are the important things for us? Where do we move forward? That's definitely one complexity. Second complexity is we are a state-affiliated university. This is not so great, but Pennsylvania is maybe 49 out of 50 states in per student funding for higher education. So that tends to be another big challenge as we look at our land grant mission of access and affordability. But I think the answer comes back to what we said, is that I have an incredible board, volunteers who do this because they love the university, unpaid position. You and I have both been on business boards a long time. Universities are able to tap into the wisdom of people who say, I want to give back. So working with the board, working with shared governance, working within the state, and of course, trying to also always work closely with employers, because we want to be sure that we are creating the most competitive talent out there, the most sought after talent out there. It's challenging, but it's also so incredibly rewarding.
Yeah. You know, let's stay on that topic of creating talent, because, you know, it used to be that the attainment of a college education was sort of your ticket to success in this country. Oh, you went to college, oh, you'll be successful. Now there are people that, you know, question that value proposition for the money. And you know, how do you feel about that sentiment today? And how do universities make sure that they are really catering to the needs of society, which is changing?
I actually do not find fault at all. There are some academics who do bristle at anyone even questioning that. To me, it's a completely reasonable, rational question. It's about a return on investment. Think about it. It is the cost of college. It's the time you spend in college. And so to me, when I look at Penn State, I'm proud to speak about Penn State University, but I think each university, each college has to think about what is the unique value we bring. I listen and I do borrow from other places. So this comes from the US Army from many, many years ago. When I think about the value proposition of higher education, a college degree from Penn State University, I think about the essence of leadership, where they call it the knowing, being, and doing. I've reorganized it a little bit to help us articulate. Think about those three things. If it's just about knowing, learning certain things, knowing certain formulas, yeah, maybe you could do it completely online. Maybe you don't need to be in a college setting. If it's about doing, learning how to do pivot tables in Excel or some other coding or something else, maybe you could pick that up on the job. I don't fault anybody for the choices that they would make. But to me, a college has to be more. It has to be about the knowing and the doing with the being and the becoming. What have we done during the time that you are here to prepare you for success, not just in your first job, but for life? I could give you statistics. You know, I joke, in God, I trust. Everybody else bring data. All right, so I have reams of data that people can double check on. Overall, if you look at just income and wealth production, that's one argument for higher education, right? Like, is there a return, a monetary return? There's no question. Even now with everything, if you look at what breaks people out of cycles of poverty, elevates them in terms of wealth creation, we know that a college degree is still the best bet. Whether it's joblessness, whether it's benefits, the type of job you get. But I think there are many more benefits to the individual and to society through a college degree. We know that a college graduate is much more likely to volunteer. We know that a college graduate reports higher life satisfaction. We find more citizenship behavior, running for office, serving. There are so many other things that accrue to a college degree. But I will also say, when it comes to my child, I will never forget, or someone else's child that I have the privilege of leading an institution and educating. I do think about there's nothing wrong with saying we need to make that person the most sought after talent. I still remember when I was dean of business, a father who came up to me and said, Neeli, I hope you will never forget the 3 letters I want to see after my child's name. I don't care if it's BBA, MBA, or PhD. I'd like to see JOB. Nothing wrong with that. Isn't that great? It's
Brilliant.
true. It is
So true.
So I do think that we teach students the knowing, the doing, and the being. So for example, look at the skills you all say you want as in employers: critical thinking, communication skills, cross-cultural competency. These are all things we should inculcate in our students. I'm a big believer. If I could wave a magic wand, I would insist that every college graduate have 1 or 2 paid internships before they're allowed to graduate, because that's part of what we owe them to test whether this is what they want to do. Sorry, I'm very passionate about this topic. I will stop and you can ask me more questions if you want.
I can't tell that you're passionate about that.
It's a lot we're asking of people. We should be.
I think, and so let's take that to the next level. I mean, obviously, since the COVID-19 pandemic, it's become more online.
Yep.
And so if you're talking about being, it seems to me that part of being is being on campus and sort of having a life on campus, right? Where you interact with people. So, can you talk about that balance now, because there is that online piece of it too. And does that take away from the being part of it?
I think it's going to be much more integrated. If you were to ask me, I don't have a crystal ball, but if I did, I would tell you that in just a few years, I don't think we'll see college students who will say, I've not taken a single online class. More and more of them are incorporating that. Or where education doesn't become something where maybe for some element of the class, I'm in person, I'm interacting with my peers. Some of it I might still do in a hybrid fashion. That's what I see happening. But if there's one thing the pandemic taught us, it is that students desperately want to still have that in-person connection. I do not see this disappearing. We've heard for a long time there will be everybody will be taking all the courses online. And it comes back to what you just said, the being element. It's hard to capture it all in a strictly online environment. Right. Breaking bread together, having those midnight sessions, debating Proust or whatever it is that college students want to talk about. That's part and parcel of what we do. So I believe it so much that I think when we think about college, I no longer think about it as the curriculum and just the degree, but the co-curricular experiences as well. The whole time that you are here, how do we leverage that? Even our students on World Campus that could do fully online, choose to live close to campus, to come and attend events, to have that interaction. So we need to be really cultivating that agility I talked about, where we are able to be accessed by people for their success now, next, and beyond. So while you're in college, for your first step after college, for life, so that you can come back and work with us.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I do think that there will always be an element of being on campus. At least I hope, because that was the most significant piece looking back on my college career. No question about it.
Yes, you agree, right? I mean, when you look back on where your big growth was as a person coming into your own, that's part and parcel of it.
Yeah. So Neeli, let me switch gears a little bit. So, philanthropy is very important in a university, right? And philanthropy absolutely requires us to, the university at least, to establish loyalty with its students. And you've always been a marketing guru as long as I've known you. And so put your consumer loyalty experience hat on and talk to me about a little bit about, how you bring that to the university, Penn State.
Boy, that's a meaty question. That's a weighty question. It's something I am passionate about. When I say I'm in marketing, people think it's the jingle and the brand or the colors. To me, I've always thought of marketing as being the customer conscience of the company. Am I bringing the true value proposition? That's why I say I want every customer to feel like they really did get transformative value when they work with us. Now, the word customer is kind of problematic in higher education as it is in healthcare. People think that if I say a student is a customer, they may say, oh, what are you talking about? I'm not saying a student is a customer in the sense of, we're Burger King, you can have it your way. I want an A here, I don't want to test it. That's not what I mean. A customer to me is somebody to whom we provide value as our reason for being. If we were not providing value to them, we should not exist. So when I think about this, I look at the people who give to Penn State. There are many, and we're deeply, deeply grateful. They do so either because they look back on what Penn State did in their lives, where they would they be where they are without the confluence of experiences, the transfluence of Penn State in their lives, as you would say. Or they may not have gone here, but they say, I believe in what you're doing for helping the youth of today, the young at heart of today, get to where they are. I believe in that mission. So to me, that's what it comes down to. How do we explain the value proposition? Transparency, being authentic, being able to share what we are doing. These are all things that build that loyalty. And of course, we do have to know that you cannot treat faculty and staff and students poorly while they're here. And the minute they graduate, expect them to turn around and be loyal alumni. So to me, it's a life cycle. The beauty of Penn State, because it predates me, it's gone on forever, is the true love that people have for Penn State. And so that's loyalty that's created by what happens in the classroom, what happens in the athletic fields, in the artistic arenas. It's the whole being and how they value it. So that's how I view true value generation. While they're here, for their first job, for their whole lives.
I couldn't agree with you more. And so the more I'm reminded of that, the more loyal I become to the university. There's no question about it. You said it really well. Another thing, I read recently that you met with India's Prime Minister Modi when he came to Washington, D.C. to meet the President Biden. And I'm kind of curious, is there anything you found interesting from that meeting, and particularly as it relates to higher education, what you do, or just anything outside of that you thought was kind of interesting as well?
It was very, very interesting. I was proud to represent Penn State at a pre-meeting, which came about because our National Security Advisor, Mr. Sullivan, and his Indian counterpart pulled together the U.S.-India Business Council to talk about how can the two countries work together on critical and emerging technologies, cybersecurity, AI, all of these different areas, and how can we collaborate. So after that, to be one of 3 U.S. presidents, higher education presidents, not presidents, in the United States of Indian origin, to talk to him was fascinating. There is, I think, something like 40% of the world's under 25-year-olds will be in India, if I'm not mistaken. It's some staggering number like that. So it was great to see the opportunities to partner, and very, very proud that Penn State was one of the universities asked to be at the table, because they're trying to look at how do we partner on everything from agriculture to cybersecurity to national defense. The idea is that the world's two great democracies, there may be ample opportunity. I left India. I've frankly lived here when I was about 22. So I've lived here way longer than I've lived there, but it was wonderful to see those different experiences collide.
Do you go back there much, Neeli?
I went back in 2018, but after that, COVID and so on, I've not been able to. Definitely looking forward to it because there are huge opportunities. Penn State, I don't know if people know this, we produce more STEM majors, that's science, technology, engineering, mathematics, than any other university in the country. So we've always had a long tradition of international students being here. We were #1 for Fulbright scholars this year in the country, our professors who travel around the world. So I'm hoping that everything comes together and I'm able to go visit some of our alumni and build on those relationships.
Absolutely. So Neeli, I'm just 2 more questions for you. And one you may have answered earlier because I asked it in a little bit different way, but we've got a number of younger listeners who aspire to be leaders like you someday. Is there any advice that you'd give them as to, how they might think about applying, whatever advice you give them in their leadership journeys?
Depending on how young they are, one of the things I tell them is, actually probably this is true at any age, remember that it's not about you. And remember that not everybody is thinking about you nonstop. So when I first started out, I used to be very afraid that if I made a mistake or said something, that it would be top of mind for everyone. The harsh truth is we are not that important. Everybody's busy thinking about what's everyone else thinking about me. So free yourself from that because that can be a big burden. The second thing I learned is that there's so much value in asking for help. There are a lot of people, what's the worst that'll happen? They'll say no. But it is be grateful for that, pay it forward, but saying, how would you handle this? Finding those mentors, finding people who will tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. I think those are a couple of things I would say are important, and really find your purpose. What is it that you want to make a difference on in life?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And speaking of those mentors, I write about it in the book. I do think that to the extent that we can seek those people out in our lives, and it's hard to do that because they're not always telling you things that you want to hear, but they will make you better people down the road for sure. And I sought out several of them as my life went on, as my career went on. So I could not agree with you more. But you also mentioned the word grateful. And I'm going to end like I end in all of my interviews, and that is asking you a question about that, because I actually think that your attitude matters in life. And I've found that the people that I like to gravitate to are the ones that look at life with a glass half full as opposed to half empty. And much of that comes down to just being a gracious person, gratitude, being thankful for the things that you have. So, Neeli, I'm going to end with this, but what is it that you're most grateful for?
I'm incredibly grateful for my family. Probably if you cut down to at core, I'm a person of faith. I do have gratitude. I agree with you that you could live through life with a sense of entitlement or a sense of gratitude. And it's funny, this is, I'll show you this. There are some things I keep close to me. One is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I find great comfort in thinking about people who dealt with big problems, and a small sign that says gratitude is a state of heart. So I try to be grateful for so many things, but at this point in my life, I am so grateful to have the support of a loving family.
That's awesome. I have to agree, at least on my end for sure.
Things I'm most grateful for, because I'm also unbelievably grateful. to be president of Penn State University.
Well, I know you are, and I'm grateful that you're there. That we actually have a leader that is there leading as well as you are. So thank you for that, Neeli. And I'd like to tell you how grateful I am that you've been on the show today. This has just been absolutely awesome. And, so thank you again for being on and spending the time that you have with me and our guests. And I'd like to thank everybody who made the decision to be on today. Thank you all for being on. And also I want you to make sure that you're keeping an eye out for future Off the Rak interviews. Check out my LinkedIn newsletter, which is now called Off the Rak Plus, where you can find previous episodes, you can find resources, you can find transcripts and more. So next month, so everybody knows, we are going to have Clint Hurdle, who is the former manager of the Colorado Rockies and the Pittsburgh Pirates, on, and Dan O'Dowd, who was the former GM of the Rockies, who is now an anchor on the MLB network. And they're both terrific leaders. They're so much fun, and you're not going to want to miss that. So please be back. And until then, I encourage all of you to be human and find a way to have a positive influence on somebody around you each and every day. So thank you, everybody, for being on. And Neeli, thank you again.
Thank you for being my mentor.